hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Straight Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraki, and on Straight Talk we deal with political, social, and economics here in Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. Now joining me tonight,
Dennis Burnside,
Charles Thomas,
Badgett Maynard.
All right, man, we got a lot to cover tonight, but I just want to mention the John Lewis bill, because as we can see, a lot of these states are steady changing stuff almost every week, you know, and
to suppress voting rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with Dr. John Lewis bill passed, all of these things become law. And right now, nobody even talking about it in Washington, you know. And there's a few Democratic people, one from New York, I think it's from New York. Well, there's a couple from New York. The lady from Texas, and one or two from California. But the thing is that if we don't get the John Lewis bill passed, all of these things these states are putting in goes into effect.
Yeah. Well, that's why the John Lewis Act was so important. It codifies the right to vote into U.S. law. It makes it illegal to suppress votes.
Yeah.
It makes it illegal to gerrymander based on race. It makes it illegal to pass laws that say you can't pass water out or have fewer voting machines than you know the population would support and need. It makes all those things illegal. But the problem that we have now is we have some Democrats. Well, first thing is we don't have one Republican who's announced support for the John Lewis bill.
Right.
They give it lip service, but they haven't said they vote for it.
Right.
The biggest problem though we have is that Democrats are too cowardly and afraid to end the filibuster. Now, if you remember, Turtle McConnell did it for Supreme Court and federal judges. He took the filibuster away and said, we'll ram it through with just 60 Republican votes.
Yeah.
The Democrats could do the same thing with this bill here and say, we're going to pass this one and we're going to make this type of legislation when it comes to voting rights filibuster proof. Filibusters don't apply to this type of vote. They could do that, but somehow they're too cowardly. You can bet your bottom dollar. When the Republicans take back power, if it happens this fall or if it happens in 2024, they will eliminate the filibuster on whatever initiative that they prioritize that they think that the Democrats wouldn't vote for, that they couldn't get 10 Democrat votes for. They won't hesitate.
Tell us something.
They hate
Dennis.
the truth.
What's that, man?
What does it take to end the filibuster?
It takes it's just a rule. It's not in the Constitution. It's not a law. All the Senate has to do is say we will no longer require a 60 vote minimum to pass legislation. We'll make it a simple majority vote, which is what it should be in the first place.
51,
because already the Senate is distorted. When you have a state like Wyoming, which is like 95% white, and they've got maybe 2 million people, having the same legislative power as a state of California, which has 25 million people, and has over 50% of its minority, heavily Democratic leaning.
Yeah.
Wyoming has just as much juice as California, so that's anti-democratic to begin with. Then you add the filibuster on top of it, it just makes it impossible to pass meaningful legislation that white supremacists don't want to see passed.
Right.
Yeah.
On top of that, too, you find the filibuster. You used to have to get in there, stand up, and say your piece for however long. Now you could simply say, I'm filibustering, and it's done. That's
Calling
all.
in from home.
Yeah. You were saying.
I'm saying that John Lewis bill is too much truth in that, so it's not gonna. It'll do more damage than good to the.
For who?
The John Lewis bill.
Will do too much.
Too much damage to those racist people in politics.
Of course.
Yeah.
If you tell them, for example, in 2016 we had a highly contested, highly controversial gubernatorial election in the state of Georgia, right? Between the Secretary of State at that time, his name is, I'm drawing a blank on it, and Stacey Abrams. But for voting machinations where they had black folks waiting in line for 12, 14 hours in the cold and rain. Stacey Abrams would have been the governor of Georgia back then, and she's running again. But the idea that we have free, unfettered democracy in the United States and we should be an example to the rest of the world is a laughable joke.
Dennis, don't forget that there were thousands of people requesting their registration as voters that was sitting there in the Secretary of State's office. He refused to do anything about it, so that because they were mainly blacks, they couldn't get to vote. So that's another way. We don't want you to vote, we just stick your stuff aside until we finish the election.
Yeah, it's Jim Crow's son who goes by James. And we're supposed to not recognize that James Crow is the son of Jim Crow. And it's the same damn thing. We don't want you to vote. How many jelly beans are in this jar? Okay, you can guess that. Go stand in line and have to take the day off, which is not a holiday.
Right.
You have to give up your work day. You have to give up probably your pay. And stand in line for 12 hours, whatever the weather be damn, and hope your vote is counted. That's what it is. So it's nothing more than another iteration of Jim Crow.
Then we have to stop saying this
really
is
means
democracy.
no.
Up's really down.
Yeah, we could no longer say this is democracy, because that is totally opposite to what democracy is.
Well, you know,
there's trickery.
There's never been a democracy here, no way. In
Not for us.
No, you know, it's been a thing where the ones with money and the ones with their color, they set the rules and everything, and everybody else follows along.
Yeah, and our leadership in our community goes on to knucklehead preachers that are afraid of white folks. They won't raise their voice.
Well, not all, man. I mean, Raphael Warnock's a preacher.
Yeah,
and he's a great man. He does great things.
But he's got the odds against him.
But when you think about
he's running for senator in Georgia.
You have too many preachers, pastors, who are willing to buckle under, rather than stand up and tell the people the truth. Now, even though it's not preaching your sermon on Sunday, Saturday, whichever day you go to church, you must still tell the truth.
Well, let's be fair.
That is something we have to come up with.
Yeah, but let's be fair, Paget. I mean, if it wasn't for the black church we wouldn't have had a civil rights movement in the late 1950s through the mid 1960s. That was led by the Black
true.
Christian Church.
True.
Martin Luther King didn't walk around talking about Allah, okay? We didn't have a whole lot of atheists stepping up and leading the way when it came to the civil rights movement. So black preachers can be some duplicitous, money-hungry, selfish people. Yes,
as long as they
but
can-
not all. Let's not paint them with
No,
the
I
brown.
would never say
Well,
everyone.
I'm gonna say a majority of them.
Well,
Even Reverend Billy Kyle, he's the one that turned on King,
well,
and that was his hit man.
Yeah,
to me,
Billy
since-
Kyle marched, right?
to me, the churches, up until I would say 40 years ago, or maybe 45 years ago, was the only place that blacks could go discuss things and all of that.
Yep.
No, that's what I.
Oh, it's
I
absolutely
say.
true.
Yeah.
Somebody lost a job and doesn't have enough money to feed the family, the black church came
Yeah.
along. Somebody was evicted from the home, the black church came to the rescue. Somebody had legal problems, the black church came to
Yeah.
the rescue.
True.
So we shouldn't denigrate the black church to the
No,
point
no.
that we think they're completely
And-
useless.
you know, I'm
We
not-
should just be honest about the black
I'm not
church.
hitting all
lead-
of them.
Yeah, the leadership.
Because they're not everybody doing the same thing.
Well-
but what I'm saying is, wherever, in whichever church that's being done, they need to step up to the plate and present the truth.
Yeah.
We have to give people truth.
Yeah.
Well,
And we need economics in our community to circulate money, just like we had on Black Wall Street. You know, the money stayed and went around in the community. But when they built these highways in these big cities, they went right through the black business section, and they never recouped. We never regained it. You know, so
Well, the bad news is it's just not the black community either. If you're not a corporate entity, if you're not a Walmart, if you're not a Myers, if you're not a Rite Aids, if you're not a Walgreens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's going to be real hard for you to put a shingle up and compete. You want to sell birthday cards, holiday cards? Good luck. You want to sell candy and soda and ice cream?
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I don't care what color you are. You can go to many communities across this country and see where mom and pop stores that used to be there for
Yes,
decades
yes.
were decimated by the appearance of Walmart. So it's just not the black community.
I put it like this: it's because in all these immigrants that's in our neighborhood, they don't give back to the neighborhood; they take from the neighborhood. So, I mean, we need to set up and see reality in our community that we can do this too.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute.
well,
Yeah,
Those people who come here from, say, Lebanon, they come here from India,
yeah,
they come here from Iran,
yeah. Your
and
tax breaks.
they set up businesses in the black ghettos,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Gas stations, chicken places,
Yeah.
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's odd that they can go to the bank, having just moved here,
yeah.
Yeah.
and go to the bank and get capital based on their business plan and establish their business with rarely any hindrance.
Yeah. And
But
tax
let you and
breaks.
me do it.
Yeah.
So again, we have to be very careful about blaming the victim for the victim's position. Because if it's easy to get capital for someone who's a recent immigrant here, it should be just as easy for someone who's been there their entire life and they've been here for generations and is trying to do something
Right,
for the
right.
community. And the reason why it isn't is the same reason we're not told the truth about our history.
Yeah.
It's the same reason we're not told the truth about our spirituality. It's the same reason we're not told the truth about just about anything you want to mention when it comes to African history. Is because the powers that be don't want that known.
Yeah.
They'd rather have you suppressed and thinking you're inferior than have the truth of your existence
Yeah.
explained to you,
Right.
and you realizing you don't need anything from them.
Right,
Well-
right. But that's why I think if we would come together and with that understanding and don't give up and keep pushing for economics. You know, just because somebody is rejecting you or is trying to stop you, that's to push harder.
Well, Well, you know, for me, and you know, I always go back to late 50s and 60s, and 60s and early 70s, where we were moving. You know, after the riots and all them other different things, we were moving, and when younger blacks began to get the jobs that we were fighting for, you know, for them these people to get. Then when they got the jobs and moved out of the neighborhoods, and you know, and said later for that neighborhood and everything. This is some of the reason to me that we're where we're at now. You know.
Again, I can't agree with that. Because if you look before integration, before the civil rights movement, before the redlining of Jim Crow compelled everyone to live in the same economic area, you would have a doctor living next door to a janitor living next door to a plant worker living next door to someone unemployed, right? And that was the community.
Yeah.
Well, you had a lot of ability to accumulate generational wealth stultified by that. By that redlining, by the FHA saying we're not going to give loans to you because you're black and you live in this area.
Yeah.
So I don't blame someone who finally had the freedom of movement to move where their money could afford to take them and build wealth intergenerationally that way. Now let me finish.
Okay.
Now the most important thing that we need to understand is that during that period of Jim Crow legislation where black folks were held within these red lines en masse, and I should say we still are, but to a lesser extent. You still had black economic development that we don't have today. You had one of the largest Ben Franklin pharmacies anywhere in the country was on the south side of Chicago in Bronzeville.
Yeah.
You had some of the biggest record companies sprout up from nothing and go international like Motown and Atlantic and other lakes. Where black folks put their foot down and established businesses, we did well within the confines of a limited market. Now, we no longer have that limited market, but now we're in the age of corporatism and corporate dominance. How do you build business? I can go online. I've got a bookmark on my phone right now, a site where it has all black businesses, and I can go there and choose whatever I want to buy just about and buy it from a black business. Maybe it's more of a consciousness thing that we ought to look at that instead of going to Amazon.
Well,
but it's not as if we're not doing things to develop our own economy.
Well,
that's just not true that we're not.
The thing is that, you know, I go back to Malcolm X, you know, and I guess the thing is that we didn't really do what he said, you know, try to do what he was saying, you know, because he had back then, him and Dr. King both, they had the idea, you know. But again, as I say, you know, a lot of blacks got these jobs and they left the neighborhoods and everything, and you know, there's when all of the money, when the money is being made and it's not coming into the neighborhood dies.
Yeah, it needs to circulate within.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep going back to these churches. If these churches would stop causing all this division with all these different pulpit idiosyncrasies, dialogue, and create a credit union, and if from that credit union people can borrow money and set up established businesses, and then the people will say, well, maybe I should go and donate my money, and you know, and not just black people. I'm talking about for the whole community.
Well,
but if a church can't come together, how you expect the community to come together?
Look at Black Wall Street.
Yeah,
that was back in 20,
It was destroyed in 1921.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Chuck a minute. Some time ago here, you talk about having to speak to a certain individual, a minister here, about a program, and his response was, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
That is the heart of why you're not going to get what you're talking about in this community.
And that's the mentality of preachers.
Because everybody, every one of these, well, most of these or many of these ministers, it's what's in it for me. So
Yes.
if you are not going to get something coming to you, you don't care. You have no interest in anything else, no matter how good that was.
Right.
And we got to wonder, if we circle back a little bit to this voting business, we got to wonder how much of this is impacting on the people. Because if I only want the Democrats to come into my church and talk.
Mhm.
So I allow the Democrats. And because in many of these churches, the people seemingly are worshiping the pastor more than God.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right?
Yeah.
They're going to do what the pastor says.
Yeah.
Well, okay, pastor. Why not give the people good, solid information? Help them to understand why you need to vote for this person and not just because I said so.
Yeah.
Well, you got to put some of the responsibility on the flock. Because I know of a couple cases where you had a pastor
Mhm.
who had been to seminary, learned his business.
Mhm.
Then someone pulled his coat about African spirituality and the historical truth of African spirituality. And when they started preaching that from the pulpit, oh, they were out of a job. And I know of a particular black spiritual teacher who said that he went to several of his former peers who still lead flocks in the Pentecostal church. And he said that they told him, look, man, you messing up my money.
Mhm.
Because if I have to say that, if I tell that truth, the flock isn't going to want to hear that.
Exactly.
So maybe these pastors who go to these people and say, look, we need to start looking at a way to develop an economic base within our own community. Maybe the flock doesn't want to hear that. They want to hear hooping and hollering and you know, how the Jacob blew his horn in the wall. fell
Well,
down.
just like my message.
Maybe that's
just
what it
let
is.
them
Yeah.
feel good.
It's I call it the Lazarus syndrome.
Well, we all we do is look at Lansing. You know, in Lansing, it's probably, this is like 20 years ago, right on the south side. Me and my brother was just riding around, and we counted about 21 churches on the south side.
Yeah.
You know, and in Lansing as a whole, it's only probably 23,000 blacks now. You know,
Yeah.
used to be
Only
25.
that?
Used to
Yeah.
be
I
25,000.
mean, with the amount of churches in our community, a brother should be able to walk on water.
Yeah. I mean, really, you know.
Yeah. But you got more crime, more incest, all kinds of misdevious things
Yeah.
going on in our
And I'm going to
community.
say one thing more on that. The problem,
They
a
ain't teaching-
big problem we have, greed.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay? Selfishness.
Right.
And as long as I am getting my share, I don't care whether you get or not.
well,
Right.
see,
And until they change that mentality,
Yeah.
well, see, Patrick, it all bags down. We always have to look back, because right now, and we've talked about this. We at the back of the line, really. Everybody comes to this country can step in line in front of us.
not really.
But think about it, Ahmad.
I'm
If you've
not
got
in
a
the front
myth,
of the line.
if you've got a myth that Western civilization is built upon,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to acknowledge that Western civilization dominates the planet, you have to acknowledge that.
Yeah. White
If
supremacy.
you say to someone and it becomes well known that the idea that white people are superior intellectually and historically and spiritually and economically, et cetera, is a myth and a lie,
Big
that is
phony.
not true.
Yeah.
If you do that, the
Yeah.
foundation begins to crumble, and all of a sudden you've got real problems. So people go out of their way, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, we talked about in the last show, to keep this myth of white supremacy and Western civilization being the supreme development of human history intact because it's in their economic and political interest to do so. And people on our side of the fence, we get too comfortable with this narrative and we learn how to work within it and you know, have the weekends off and be able to take the spouse out to dinner on Friday and maybe to a show on Saturday and send our children to school and get an education, and we get comfortable. But we don't demand that the truth about who we are be taught. And if the truth of who we are was ever to be known en masse by our people, you would see young men, instead of walking around with the pants hanging down off their butts, they would walk around with the chin up in there and the chest out with pride. You would see young women walking around more consider what you think about what's in their head than what's on their behind. We would have a whole different self-esteem and understanding that whatever we want to accomplish is within us. The lie has to be
has to be dealt with. And
you know, Dennis, that's a good word, self-esteem. Maybe we have to start there to build self-esteem so that people will now begin to see the other things that are needed.
They convinced us that we are a color. We're not a color. We're melanated people. Your melanin turns light in the energy. I mean, and you can't produce it.
No.
We are a blessed people, but we've been beat down by this lie of this white image.
Problem is we believe the lie.
Yeah, we bought into the lie.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm melanin.
You know, hey, you know, for me, most people in the world are melanin. You know?
Well,
yeah.
So,
but you know, no one individual can make a decision about whether or not they're going to choose the melanated model or the non-melanated model when they come into this world.
No.
So I'm not going to look down on anyone who's of European descent and say to them somehow that you're less than me, et cetera, et cetera.
No.
Now I know
because they already did that.
That the fact, they do that to me.
Yeah.
You know, how many times? Well, I ain't even going to go into my own personal story, but the point is that unless and until you learn your own story and take responsibility for your own development, then you have no chance because they're certainly not going to teach you to. So whenever I hear, you know, I was out to dinner with a group of people the other day, and they said, well, let me bless the table. And they repeated some verses and said in Jesus' name. And I was sitting there, I didn't say anything. You know, I'm polite.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there thinking, I wonder if I said I'd like to lead a prayer, and I talked about Amun Ra, and I ended the prayer with Ashe, they would look at me like I was a damn fool and what you've been tripping on when I'm talking about the truth. I'm not talking about something that was made up.
The truth is foreign to them.
It's absolutely foreign. The lie is so pervasive that people don't recognize the truth as it is when it hits them in the face. It's very few people that I run across that I can sit down and have a conversation about the 25th dynasty of Kemet, or the fact that you have this huge library of information in what we now call Mali that's been there for thousands of years. I can't have a conversation with people about how the so-called Alexandrian library was nothing but a place where they looted all the libraries essential in Nile Valley, Africa, put it in one place and burned down. You can't have that conversation because people turn, what are you talking about? It's as if you're offending their sensibilities when you hit them with the truth. So man, it's going to continue to be this way unless and until we teach our children.
Frederick Douglass said this in about 5 years before he passed away. He said, from the time you get here to the time you leave, it's a struggle. And most of us don't realize what he was saying. My name is Ahmad Shakarakin, and we catch you around the next block. Peace.
Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.